In 1955, The Benny Hill Show was launched and quickly became one of the most famous comedy programs in the UK, with its slapstick-style high-speed chase scenes and lively music like Yakety Sax Benny Hill created a unique entertainment brand that made audiences worldwide laugh. However, controversy quickly arose as the show was criticised for excessive sexual innuendo and numerous sketches deemed offensive to women. This made it a focal point for the feminist movement and ultimately led to the show ending after 3 decades. So what made The Benny Hill Show both appealing and controversial? What are the darkest secrets of Benny Hill? Was it his frugal, miserly nature or the loneliness of living alone his whole life due to shyness around women? Let's explore the 20 most shocking truths about The Benny Hill Show. 20. The mind behind the entire show. Benny Hill was not only the face of The Benny Hill Show, he was the mind behind almost all of its content. Over 90% of the scripts, sketches and musical numbers were written by Hill himself, and he even directly supervised the set's soundtrack and staging of each scene. From the playful musical pieces to the iconic chase sequences ending each show, everything bore his creative imprint. Beyond the TV program that made his name famous, Benny Hill also left his mark on several notable films. Audiences saw him in Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines 1965 as the toy maker in Chitty Chitty, Bang Bang 1968, and as Professor Peach in the blockbuster The Italian Job 1969. Even outside the world of television comedy, Hill demonstrated versatile acting skills, transforming from silly comedic roles to richly cinematic characters. 19. Hill's Angels became a show icon. Do you remember Hill's Angels? The dancers who became the visual emblem of the show, often appearing in the humorous chase scenes at the end, musical sketches, and comedic sexy dance routines. Interestingly, Hill's Angels were not a fixed group like other bands or dance troupes. The number of members usually ranged from 7 to 8 per episode, and the lineup changed continuously across seasons. However, a few faces became familiar and especially beloved by fans such as Sue Upton and Louise English. The performances of Hill's Angels were elaborately staged with diverse choreography, from light dances in playful costumes to more shocking acts like the Invisible Striptease in 1982. This mix of sensuality, humour and creativity made them a distinct highlight in the history of British television comedy. Do you remember this impressive dance troupe? Share your thoughts in the comments. 18. Benny Hill proposed multiple times but was never accepted. Throughout his life, Benny Hill never married, despite having all the conditions to do so. On screen, Hill was a ladies' man constantly chasing the silhouettes of women in endless comedic chase sketches. Yet in real life, he was the complete opposite, shy, private, and unbelievably lonely. During his life, he proposed at least 3 times. One of the famous women he proposed to was actress Annette Andre in the early 1960s. But the answer he received was always rejection. Some believed Hill was too eccentric to maintain a family life. Others thought he was too devoted to work to leave room for love. He often admired women from afar, but rarely had the courage to take things further. Some anecdotes even suggest that Hill silently cared for women who never reciprocated. His shyness, combined with his eccentric and reclusive personality, caused his romantic opportunities to quietly slip away. His family life had lacked affection from an early age, and after his mother passed away in 1976, Benny Hill's loneliness became even more pronounced. Instead of living in a lavish mansion like many contemporaries, he chose small apartments in London, walking or taking buses everywhere, shopping like any ordinary man. The wealth he amassed from his enormous fame was not used to build a home but stored quietly, just like his private self. Friends and colleagues often said that this emptiness in his personal life drove Hill to immerse himself in work endlessly. He wrote, acted, directed, filling the silence with the laughter of millions worldwide. Yet even that laughter could not fill the void when he returned to his small apartment where only his reflection was company. Many believe this loneliness was the greatest tragedy in the life of a comedian who seemed to have it all. 17. The show became a primary target of feminism. In the 1980s, when the feminist movement in the UK was growing strong, the Benny Hill Show became a primary target of criticism due to its portrayal of women in sketches. The show frequently used humorous chase scenes with women where Benny Hill was either pursued or surrounded by young women dressed provocatively like Hill's angels. Although Hill claimed these scenes were purely for entertainment and not intended to offend, many viewers saw them as demeaning to women and reflective of societal sexism. Feminist activists like Sheila Jeffreys criticised the programme for using women as sensitive objects in sketches. Additionally, television critic Ben Elton vocally condemned Benny Hill, calling him a filthy man, tearing the clothes off young girls and chasing them around the park. While Hill maintained that these scenes were intended only for fun and not to insult, many still viewed them as undermining women and perpetuating gender bias in society. 16. Including children to garner sympathy. Throughout his career, Benny Hill often faced criticism that his show was too adult, sometimes overtly suggestive and satirical. In response, Hill made a clever move. He included children in his sketches. For him, the innocence and pure laughter of children not only softened controversies, but also provided an interesting counterpoint to his cheeky comedy. The presence of kids made the Benny Hill Show more relatable and gentle, making it harder for audiences and critics to attack too harshly. Instead of hiring professional child actors accustomed to smiling on cue, he preferred the children of his crew members. According to Hill, it was the children's genuine, spontaneous, and sometimes unpredictable reactions that made the scenes appealing. This approach made many scenes more lively, as the audience could sense the natural authenticity in every moment. 15. The show almost didn't happen because critic Ronald Waldman mocked Hill's humour. While many comedians in the 1950s were sceptical, even mocking television as a passing fad, Benny Hill saw its future. Full of sketch ideas, Hill wrote hundreds of scripts and approached the BBC, ready to try his luck. However, fate played a cruel trick. The first door he knocked on opened to a familiar face: Ronald Waldman, a notorious television producer and critic. Years earlier, Waldman had written a harsh critique of Hill's early career, criticising him as lacking comedic personality and not funny at all. Now, facing the person who had once crushed his hopes, Hill had one goal: to make Waldman swallow those bitter words. And the opportunity came. Waldman read through Hill's latest sketches full of witty satire, fast-paced rhythm, and rich imagery. To his surprise, the critic who had been so harsh previously burst out laughing and immediately changed his tune. He forgot all past criticisms and on the spot offered Hill his own television show on the BBC. This was the turning point from a struggling comedian seeking recognition. Benny Hill officially entered his golden era. 14. 3 black and white episodes never broadcast. In the early 1970s, an unexpected event caused several episodes of The Benny Hill Show to be filmed entirely in black and white. ITV's colour technicians went on strike from November 1970 to February 1971, refusing to operate the colour equipment even though it was ready. As a result, 3 special episodes of the show aired during this period in black and white, creating a striking contrast in the era of colour television. These episodes were later never rebroadcast in the UK and never aired in the US, becoming a mysterious phenomenon in the show's history. However, these black and white episodes still found their way to international audiences. They were rebroadcast in Australia and included in fan collections such as the Benny Hill Annuals The Ultimate Collection, released by Via Vision Entertainment. This collection compiles episodes from 1969 to 1989 including the 3 special strike episodes, providing a rare opportunity for modern audiences to experience Benny Hill in a classic style never seen on American screens. 13. The final episode, aired on May 1st, 1989, but specials followed. On May 1st, 1989, The Benny Hill Show officially concluded its 34-year run with a special episode titled Tales of the Unexpected. This was Benny Hill's final appearance in the official programme produced by Thames Television. In this episode, audiences were treated to a series of familiar sketches, Hill Angels parodying the openings of popular shows like The Bill Boone and Tales of the Unexpected, as well as satirical sketches like The Good Guys featuring bumbling police officers. Hill also revisited one of his most beloved sketches, Pepys's Diary, ending with a fishing scene alongside The Little Angels where an unexpected jailbreak causes chaos. However, goodbye did not mean the end. After 1989, Benny Hill still produced a few memorable specials such as Benny Hill, the World's Favourite Clown, aired on January 1st, 1991, and the unfinished project Benny Hill's World Tour, which aimed to bring his characters and sketches to the countries where he was most beloved. Were you moved by Benny Hill's final episodes? Share your thoughts in the comments. 12. Famous for parodying celebrities. The Benny Hill Show became famous for its fearless parodies. One classic sketch, Murder on the Oregon Express, was inspired by Agatha Christie's detective novel Murder on the Orient Express. Here Hill simultaneously portrayed multiple well-known detectives like Hercule Poirot, Ironside, MacLeod Cannon, and Kojak. On a train full of conspiracies and bloody crimes, each character was exaggerated to the extreme. Ironside's authority caused him to fall into the toilet as the train rocked. Kojak overreacted to every detail absurdly, and MacLeod acted like an over-the-top cowboy in unnecessary situations. Hill didn't stop at classic characters. He also parodied popular American TV series from the 1970s and 1980s. For example, Husky and Starch was a direct spoof of Starsky and Hutch, turning the slick cops into a clumsy, bumbling duo. Similarly, the sketch The B-Team parodied the A-Team, but instead of competent warriors, Hill's team consisted of quirky, slow characters who caused more disasters than solutions. These parodies both entertained audiences and humorously highlighted the gap between heroic TV images and everyday reality. Beyond series spoofs, Hill cleverly mocked famous figures in pop culture. He turned Johnny and Fanny Craddock into Johnny and Cranny Faddock, Barry Norman into Barry Normal, and Clive James into Cinema with Clive James. 11. Harsher criticism in the UK. At its peak, The Benny Hill Show was not just a TV programme, it was a global phenomenon. Hill's slapstick comedy, fast-paced rhythm and ridiculous chase sequences transcended language barriers, captivating over 140 countries. In the US, the show ranked among the top TV hits of the 1980s, with some episodes drawing over 100 million viewers worldwide. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand aired the programme in prime time. South America treated Hill as a cultural icon, and in the heavily censored USSR bootleg copies quietly circulated. Yet the bitter irony was in his home country. While the world hailed Benny Hill as the UK's most successful export star, making him wealthier than many Hollywood comedians, British media considered him a national embarrassment. What made millions of foreigners laugh was criticised domestically as crude and vulgar. 10. The shocking cancellation decision. In 1989, when audiences were still laughing at legendary chase scenes, a shocking blow came. Thames Television announced the cancellation of The Benny Hill Show. After more than 2 decades on air and achieving global phenomenon status, the show was suddenly terminated in a cold meeting. John Howard Davies, head of entertainment at Thames, looked Hill in the eye and said, "It's time to stop." the man who had made millions laugh sat silently. The reasons sounded reasonable but were bitter. Domestic viewership had declined, production costs were too high, and Hill appeared fatigued. In reality, the show remained a phenomenon in the US, Australia and South America, with bootlegs even reaching the USSR. But in the UK, he was labelled outdated, mocked as vulgar, and targeted by feminist groups for allegedly turning women into jokes. The global audience adored him, but British critics despised him, and this contradiction ultimately buried the once unbeatable show. 9. Broadcast over 35 years. The Benny Hill Show debuted on January 15, 1955 on the BBC, beginning a 34-year journey before ending on May 1, 1989. During this period, the show changed homes multiple times, moving from BBC to ATV and finally settling at Thames Television, where episodes were produced as elaborate specials. In total, there were over 100 official episodes alongside countless special broadcasts, making Benny Hill one of the most familiar faces on UK television. The show reached its peak in the early 1970s, attracting over 21 million viewers in the UK, at times a figure that made competitors take notice. Hill even won a BAFTA for his scripts and became a global phenomenon, with the US continuing to air the show into the 1990s. 8. Music was a highlight of the show. Music was an essential part of the Benny Hill Show, and the track most associated with it was Yakety Sax. Composed in 1963 by Boots Randolph and James Q. Rich. It was originally a saxophone single with American folk influences. When Hill chose it as the soundtrack for fast-paced slapstick chase scenes, it instantly became iconic. Audiences could picture chaotic chases slips and exaggerated comedy just from hearing the opening notes. Benny Hill also made his mark with original music. In 1971, he released the comedic song Ernie, the Fastest Milkman in the West, telling the story of the fastest milkman in the West and a symbolic love triangle. What seemed merely humorous unexpectedly became a hit, reaching #1 on the UK charts and even earning the Christmas #1 title that year. The success of Ernie proved that Hill was not only a master of physical comedy, but could also make audiences laugh on a musical stage. Do you remember these two iconic songs? Share your thoughts in the comments. 7. A family of clowns. One little known fact is that Benny Hill was born into a family with a performing tradition. Both his father and grandfather had been travelling circus clowns, bringing laughter to audiences in small theatres and fairs. Although his father later switched to managing a medical equipment store, the memories of circus performances and the clumsy yet charming antics of his family instilled in Hill a special passion for the art of making people laugh. That environment made him realise early on that laughter has the power to lift spirits in any circumstance. Growing up, Hill often accompanied his family to theatres where he witnessed comedic acts, silent plays, and street performers. This exposure became his first school, teaching him how audiences react and how a clumsy gesture or a funny facial expression could explode into roaring laughter. In young Hill's eyes, clowns were not merely entertainers, but masters of crowd emotion, a skill he would later elevate into his own art form. However, having a clown's bloodline did not guarantee a smooth career path. Before achieving success, Hill worked a variety of odd jobs, from milkman and salesman to stagehand manager at small theatres. Each job gave him new perspectives and details to incorporate into his performance style. Do you enjoy Benny Hill's comedic antics? Share your thoughts in the comments. 6. Benny Hill lived an incredibly frugal and simple life. Despite becoming one of the world's most famous TV stars, Benny Hill chose an incredibly simple lifestyle. He never bought a luxury mansion or apartment in London, instead renting small flats for decades. For over 26 years, Hill lived in a double apartment in Kensington, later moving to Teddington near the studio where he worked. A detail that surprised many was that he never owned a car. Although trained to drive in the army and knowledgeable in mechanics, Hill chose to walk or take the bus across London. He often shopped for food himself, cooked his meals, and did not hire any domestic help. Even his clothing was frugally sourced. He often bought second-hand clothes or patched worn-out garments, a habit that both puzzled and amused friends and colleagues. A prime example of Hill's frugality was re-gluing shoe soles instead of buying new shoes when they loosened. This highlighted his disdain for unnecessary expenses, even for basic needs. Hill could have hired a personal assistant or even a team of helpers. But instead, Londoners would often see the famous comedian running errands and shopping on his own, always buying discounted items and hunting for the best deals. Yet he also had a peculiar enjoyment of this lifestyle. 5. Despite criticism, Hill influenced countless comedians. Benny Hill's fast, precise, and relentless comedic style not only made audiences laugh hysterically, but also paved the way for a generation of comedians. Shows like Saturday Night Live directly borrowed visual gags and chase scenes that Hill made his trademark. Even Monty Python, famous for its absurdity and satire, openly acknowledged his talent. John Cleese praised Hill's timing as genius in near-visual comedy. Hill's influence spread worldwide. In the US, Jim Carrey cited him as a major inspiration, while Eddie Murphy parodied Hill's signature chase scenes and sketches in his stand-up acts. In France, comedy programs directly copied the chase sequences Hill created. 4. Hill was very generous to others. After each performance, Hill often gave cash to fellow performers, particularly young actresses, to help them start their careers. He frequently wrote personal letters of encouragement showing genuine care for colleagues. On one occasion, Hill bought a car for a sick friend, demonstrating deep concern for others. He also supported charities, often anonymously, preferring not to publicise his good deeds. This contrasted sharply with his public persona, surprising and earning admiration from many. One memorable story about Hill's generosity involves his promise to leave his estate to close friends. According to Sue Upton, a longtime co-star, he once said, "Don't worry about money. I've left it for you in my will." However, after Hill's death, an official will was found leaving most of his estate to his family, whom he was not very close to. This sparked debate over whether an unofficial will existed leaving assets for friends and colleagues. 3. Benny Hill's death shocked the world. On April 18, 1992, the comedy world was stunned by the news of Benny Hill's death at age 68. He passed away in his small Teddington flat, London, just weeks after refusing coronary bypass surgery, despite a minor heart attack and kidney failure. His body was discovered 2 days later, quietly seated in his familiar chair in front of the still-lit TV. The scene shocked the UK. A man who brought laughter to hundreds of millions worldwide had died in absolute silence, with no wife, no children, no one by his side. Hill's legacy made his death even more tragic. With assets exceeding £7 million, he lived as an ordinary, humble man, making many believe he was not wealthy. The only will he made in 1961 left assets to his parents, who had long since passed away. Ultimately, his enormous fortune was distributed to distant relatives he barely knew. Close collaborators, like Sue Upton and Henry McGee, were rumoured to have been included in a personal will, but it was never officially recognised. His funeral in Southampton brought together comedians, colleagues and fans to bid farewell to a legend who once brought British comedy to the world. Yet the quietness of Hill's final days left a poignant mark on the public. He had been the UK's most successful export TV star, yet he passed away in solitude unknown to most. Do you feel sympathy for Benny Hill's life? Share your thoughts in the comments. 2. Walking as a travel preference. Even as a famous millionaire, Hill never owned a car, though he had a driver's license. Instead of driving or taking taxis, he often walked even long distances across London to work or appointments. This was not only a frugal habit, but also a lifestyle choice where he felt comfortable. International travel was one of the few luxuries Hill allowed himself. He particularly enjoyed France, especially Marseille, where he could relax in outdoor cafes, use public transport, and remain incognito. He spoke fluent French and had basic knowledge of other European languages like German, Spanish, Italian, and Dutch, enough for travel purposes. 1. Benny Hill still could not rest in peace. On the night of October 4th, 1992, just 6 months after Benny Hill's death, a shocking event occurred at Hollybrook Cemetery, Southampton, where he was buried. Grave robbers dug up his grave, believing he had been buried with large amounts of gold, silver, and valuable jewellery. In reality, the coffin was empty. The robbers damaged the coffin lid, but fortunately, Hill's body was unharmed. To prevent similar incidents in the future, cemetery staff quickly filled the grave and placed a 1-foot-thick concrete slab on top. This strong measure was meant to protect the resting place of one of Britain's comedy legends. Today, Benny Hill's grave remains at Hollybrook Cemetery, Southampton, and has become a pilgrimage site for his fans. The concrete slab continues to protect the grave, ensuring he rests in peace after previous disturbances. Benny Hill was not only a comedy legend, but also a complex, contradictory individual. He created The Benny Hill Show, which had a global impact, inspiring Jim Carrey, Eddie Murphy, and Monty Python. Yet while the world celebrated his talent, his homeland, the UK, once criticised him and even considered him outdated and offensive. So, do you enjoy The Benny Hill Show? Do you see Benny Hill as a comedic genius or a controversial figure? Thank you for following the 20 shocking facts about Benny Hill and his iconic show. If you enjoy behind-the-scenes stories and want to discover more bizarre truths, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to catch the next videos.